with the Alaska Incident Management Team. I wanted to welcome you to our community meeting for the Shovel Creek fire tonight. I do appreciate you all coming. I also appreciate the folks that are watching online through the Fairbanks North Star Borough Facebook page. So thank you for folks that also joined online. Again, I appreciate all the folks that came out too. Wanted to give you an update on the current fire situation, as well as looking at the smoke forecast, and then talk a little bit more about the evacuation planning, that process. So we're going to run through that tonight. Just to go cover a couple things. Again, I appreciate you coming. I wanted to thank you all for attending. I would ask to remind folks, since we do have folks online, we have a lot of people in here. If you wouldn't mind silencing your cell phones, just put them on vibrate. Right, nobody wants to be that person where we all look at you, so thank you for doing that. I'll try and remember to tell you to turn them back up when it's over. There are some handouts in the back. I know that the other public information officers were handing those out as we got started. And so we have all those materials online as well. If we don't, we'll get them there if you didn't get one. But we do have some handouts. There's also some water in the back if you need some. Go ahead and get up and grab one, or have somebody hand you a water. I want to talk a little bit before we get into the main section of the update, and just mention about donations. We've had a couple people come by to the incident command post. I know also to the Chena Goldstream Fire Station. We've had a number of folks. Just you all are wonderful, being very generous. We do appreciate that. The firefighters, the crews, the people, we have the resource that we need. We have food and water and shelter and all those things that we need. So we do thank you for that. We have some information about some suggestions of where, other ways that you can show your appreciation, because again, the folks in camp are taken care of. We do appreciate it, but we really just want to make sure, acknowledgement, some other kinds of things without having to expend a monetary resource. And I know that even our local fire departments have gotten plenty of donations. Chief has asked me to kind of also mention that too. So we have some information about some other suggestions if people are asking those questions, and I just ask maybe consider the appreciation you have, if you have it, and sharing it maybe in a thank you sign or something like that. So just wanted to cover that. So Shovel Creek Fire is currently 10,639 acres. We're going to talk about that. We're going to first, in our agenda, we have our fire weather and fire behavior. Bill Aney is our fire behavior analyst, is going to speak about the weather, what we can expect, and how that influences the fire behavior. We're going to have an update on what's happened in the last 24 hours, really, with our operations section chief, Jake Livingston. Then our incident commander, Norm McDonald, is going to give a couple remarks looking at what's in the future and some things that we need to be mindful of and thinking about. Trent Wickman is an air resource advisor. He's going to be talking about some of the smoke products that he's here in the Fairbanks area doing and creating daily for the time being. And he'll talk more about that. We have those resources online as well. Just want a handout for you too. And then David Gibbs from the Fairbanks about that evacuation process. And then finally, we have Fairbanks North Star Borough Mayor Bryce Ward is going to give a few remarks, then we'll be available for questions at the end. And as we did last time, we'll have a few questions for the audience. You think that you have something that really seems like it's a salient point for the whole group? Please, we'll go through a couple questions like that, and then we'll also have some sidebars at the end of the meeting where you can come up and speak to one of the speakers. We have a couple other people here in the audience that might be able to answer some other questions you have. So that's the order for the night. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill Aney, our fire behavior analyst.
All right, thank you. So to start off with, some of you may be wondering what in the world a fire behavior analyst is supposed to do. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that and how as a fire behavior analyst sees this fire. But my job is primarily to provide for firefighter and public safety. And that's by predicting on a daily basis what the fire behavior is going to be like. Fire behavior is things like how fast is the fire going to move, which direction is it going to go, how intensely is the fire going to burn, and so forth. And I do that by using a lot of experience, by using really good weather forecasts, and then by using some fire behavior models that we've learned to use. So how does a fire behavior analyst see this fire? We got to where we are right now because of a pretty long, dry, warm spell. It's created prime conditions for fire growth because we got very, very dry duff, and we've got black spruce trees that are very dry and very receptive to fire and very readily burn. Put it that way. They burn real readily and send embers downstream and start more fires and keep moving that way. We've seen a lot of that the last few days, including well into last night. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock last night, the fire was still moving, getting pushed by westerly and northerly winds. In black spruce, crowning, moving that way, burning very aggressively and burning very actively. Today we saw a cold front pass over the fire area, which brought the cooler temperatures that we're experiencing right now. This is a lot more comfortable here than it was a few days ago. It's a lot cooler with higher humidity and some rain for at least a few hours. Unfortunately, this weather system also brings wind, especially behind the front. And we're predicting tomorrow 10 to 15 mile-an-hour winds coming from the west on the fire area, and lasting for maybe up to 24 hours, well after the rain stops. So because of those weather conditions, the fire is less active today, at least as long as the wind holds off. The key unknown is how much rainfall we're going to get before the wind actually starts to hit the fire area harder. In terms of rain, there's two major drainages in the fire area that are running east and west, and when that east-west alignment means it's lined up with the wind, and that sort of channels that air and can actually accelerate that wind speed in those drainages. So the Chattanooga and Murphy Creek drainages lining east and west are lining up very well with that wind. Looking ahead, we don't count on the rainfall that we're getting today and tonight to have more than just a short-term effect on the fire. Some really good historical analysis locally done of the effect of rainfall on past fires, which tells us that even if we were to get like a 3/4 inch of rain tonight, the effect on fuel dryness would last for maybe 2 days. And that's because, number one, how dry it is. Number two, how much rain we're going to get, which 3/4 inch is, a substantial amount of rain, but it certainly isn't a fire, doesn't put out the fire. And three, the subsequent weather. This is intended to show you a little bit of that. Basically, before we got this rainfall, what we call the spruce adjective rating as a rating of fire danger was up here in the high category. We're going to get less than 3/4 inch of rain over 72 hours, which just puts you into this column, which means that you have 2 to 4 days of drying before you're right back to where you started before, assuming that the temperature is about 70 degrees and about 35% relative humidity. It's going to be a little cooler than that. The humidity is going to be a little bit higher than that for the next couple of days, but we also started like right in this edge between high and extreme and not just on the high. So that's why I'm saying somewhere around 2, maybe 3 days of respite before the fire picks up the same behavior that it had yesterday and the day before. And with that, I'll stop, and I'll be here afterwards for questions.
Jake Livingston, Operations Section Chief for the Alaska team. I'll start out first with what we had been doing for the last couple days as far as strategy, and then what happened with the fire, and then I'll let you know what we're doing today. The strategy for the fire over the previous 5 days has been to keep it within the Shovel Creek drainage between the 7 Mile Ridge and the Hard Luck Burn. The fire was burning actively in there and making runs up toward the 7 Mile Ridge line, and we were going direct to the north down the ridge line toward the Chattanooga River. We had people positioned along the saddle to the south between the Hard Luck burn in the main Murphy Dome, and then the crews spread out down the ridge, going direct along the fire's edge. We also had the ongoing efforts along the Chattanooga River and then the surrounding subdivisions. Yesterday afternoon, the winds picked up on the fire. A lot of activity within the Shovel Creek drainage, and then on the north end, it picked up and was laying smoke over to the east. Crews held onto the line for quite a while, but started receiving spot fires in the northern area. We're unable to keep up with it due to lack of aircraft support. They couldn't get helicopters or fixed wing aircraft in there due to the smoke conditions. Real poor visibility, and you start getting into a river drainage. Once the fire went over the 7 Mile Ridge and started moving to the east, we pulled people back to safe areas up toward Murphy Dome, and then there were several crews in the already burned area. As we did that, we started to shift resources around to different areas. We put another 20-person crew down along the Chattanooga River to assist with that and continue moving east, assessing the structures and putting up sprinklers there. We bolstered the subdivisions with engines and hotshot crews and Type 2 crews, heading east all the way around to the McLeod subdivision. We also ordered more resources, which would include engines, hand crews, and dozers. Our plan now, the primary plan, is to use the fuel break along the main Old Murphy Dome Ridge around to the McLeod subdivision, and then to use equipment, dozers and feller bunchers under the McLeod subdivision, and then put dozer line out toward the Chattanooga River. At the same time, we are looking further out, bigger picture, as far as how many structures we have, and we'll be ordering equipment and setting up as necessary.
Thanks, Jake. So yesterday, I think, is a really good example of, as Jake mentioned, what we're doing today is continuing to look at where our next line is going to be. So originally, our focus is keep the fire smallest footprint as we could. That does two things. One, it protects the structures, the homes. It limits the exposure to firefighters. We can keep a fire smaller. That's 10 days of work, 2 weeks of work compared to an all-summer campaign. So a lot of effort into that, and in the meanwhile, in the background, we're looking at our alternatives. And as we mentioned that first meeting, the best alternative we had was that fuels break that was put in 2007 and 8. So that was being improved. So, you know, as we're fighting the fire, our job as incident management team is continue to look for those next lines, next viable places where we can catch a fire. So as that fire escaped that containment yesterday, we fell back to those predetermined lines, and that's where we'll put our folks in the day. So it's an organized effort. I mean, it's something that's pre-planned. All our efforts going into catching it. We know that's going to be a hard job. We talked about that at the first meeting, temperatures, fuels. We got the winds yesterday, and that just put us someplace where we couldn't go direct anymore. Unsafe for firefighters, smoky conditions for aircraft. So that put us back to where we are today. And we're going through that same process now today. So we're going direct on that line. We've got places where we're going to put dozers down to the Chattanooga, but we're also looking for those secondary lines behind that. So we'll put all our effort into being successful here. The one thing I just want to make sure is really clear is, I mean, it is early July. We've got a lot of season left. You know, if you're from here, you know this rain is good for about 24 to 48 hours, as Bill said, and we'll take that window to improve those lines. But it's a tough battle. It's just thick spruce out there. You guys are from here, you know that. So with that, we're working very closely with the borough One of the things I want to prepare you for, so you know, is we're looking at expanding some evacuation areas. David will talk a little bit about that, and that's just to be in front of it. So if we wait to the last minute to make a decision, we're too late. We're already behind. So the pre-planning, even though we got rain, is going on right now. You'll hear some talk about those subdivisions. I think I said this first meeting. There'll be some of them going into that ready state in the near future, but all of you, no matter where you live in Fairbanks, if you're in the interior, you should be ready all summer long. So it sounds like it's ramping up, but really, I mean, if it was up to me, we'd put all the interior on ready starting in June 1st. So it shouldn't be that much of a surprise, really. So I just wanted to point that out, that's kind of what we do as a team here. We are not only fighting the fire we have right in front of us, but we're looking out longer term, building a strategy for that, and realizing this is going to be a campaign, not something we can just take care of in a short amount of time. And I want to be honest with you if I didn't let you know that as well. I mean, this is going to be a long one. It's not something we're going to put out in the near future. It's going to take a season-ending event, a rain event, to really deal with this. But we got people out there to do our number one priority. That's protect homes, public safety, and that's what we're working on. So the guys out there are working hard. They've been getting beat up the last 5 days, 6 days. This is a great little break. I don't say a break like they're resting, but they're not sucking smoke like they have been for the last, week. That helps them get that energy to keep going. And we got replacements coming in the form of crews. The folks who've been here for 2 weeks are getting timed out. They're going back home, and we're getting fresh crews in, and that's just going to be a cycle that'll continue as long as we need it. With that, one of the changes that's going to come in the middle of the week is we have another incident management team. Our team is a Type 2 incident management team with the scope and the potential longevity of this fire. The decision was made yesterday to bring a Type 1 team in. That'll do two things. One, it gets fresh bodies out here, but also two, it gets our Alaskans back into some of the positions where they can help manage these fires from their day jobs, which is really important. A lot of the people who are responsible for those duties are on these teams, on my team, the team down in Kenai, and we're definitely getting spread thin just with that workload that goes on the state. So the good news with that is the team that's coming in is out of the Pacific Northwest. The incident commander is a good friend of mine and longtime Alaskan. He's been in Fairbanks 20 years as a smoke jumper. I worked with his team several times over the last 2 years, and that's another decision we made. His team is number one in the rotation, and that's the right team to come in here and take on this challenge and be part of it. So if you guys know Rob Allen, he's a jumper up here for a long time. It'll be his team that comes in here, and that'll take place sometime Wednesday or Thursday will be that transition. And we'll be here with them through that transition, get them up to speed, get them comfortable with what they're dealing with, and then be able to turn over a really good product for those guys to start from. I don't think Jake mentioned one of the successes we had today is you're always looking for an anchor point when you're doing fire, a safe place to work from. We got containment on this piece of line that was part of that burnout along Murphy Ridge, so that gives us a really good place to anchor in, start that line from, and continue to work to the west down that Murphy Ridge. So that was a huge success. A lot of hard work went into that and some adverse conditions. So a really good job by the operations guys. I think at this point we'll turn it over to, is it David? Or, I'm sorry, our air quality. So if we'll be around here for have questions after, and I look forward to talking to you as well. Thanks.
Well, hello. My name is Trent Wickman, and I'm an air resource advisor. I was ordered up by the State Coordination Center to come up and help out with smoke. Air resource advisor is a fairly new fire position. It's been around for about 5 years. I've been doing it about that long, so I've been on many incidents around the country. I hail from Minnesota, so this looks very similar to home, and happy to be here. So I've been here a couple days so far. Right now, my purview is basically the entire state. So I'm looking at a lot of fires, and you have in your handouts a couple things that I stuck in there. The first one is if you look at the map, there's a satellite photo in there in your handout, and it's got a bunch of arrows on it, and it shows the general interior. There we go. And it shows all the fires right now with the star being Fairbanks. And so obviously you're focused on the fire that you have here, but you'll notice that there are one heck of a lot of fires going on right now. So in regards to smoke, what I just wanted to get a message across is that it's not all about this fire. There's fires all along the interior, and all that smoke mixes together. So this is just like an event, as was said before, and this is something with these fires that'll be going on for some time. The biggest issue with smoke that we worry about is fine particulates. And I understand that you guys have some issues with fine particulates in the winter here. It's same kind of thing, except it's in the summer. So you're probably aware of some of these health effects, but just real briefly, the fine particulates, the reason they're focused on is because it's that size of particulates that can make it deep into your lungs. And so the bigger ones get filtered out on the way down, and so those small ones can get into your lungs and get next to your bloodstream. That's why they're regulated. And so those are the things that we look at. And the big thing to remember is the most sensitive folks, or who the sensitive populations are, would be senior citizens, young people, and those with cardiovascular respiratory issues. So if you're in any of those groups, then maybe your interest should peak. And if you know people like that, you should kind of keep an eye out for them. So we have, in regards to smoke, we have monitors that we have out. The state already has monitors out that they keep out permanently. When folks like myself come, we can order additional monitors to kind of help fill in the gaps, and that's something that I'll be doing in the next few days, is trying to get some additional monitors up here and figure out where we're going to put them. I'm coordinating with the DEC and Weather Service and other state folks on those locations. The results will be put out daily. The information officers put them out daily. And if you want to go see where the site is, it's wildlandfiresmoke.net. If you go there and look at the outlooks, you'll see the outlook that I put out every day for different areas across the state. The outlooks... you'll see in your handouts too, there's a rainbow page, and the outlooks are put out in colors, and it's the same system that the state uses and all states use. Actually, it was developed by EPA to help you understand just how severe the air quality might be on a certain day. The nice thing about the one that you have in your handout there is that for each category, it talks about what you should do if we're in that category, if you're one of those sensitive folks or know somebody that's in the sensitive category. So as you look at the information from day to day, you can use that as a guide to help you make some decisions on what you should do. And so for the last 2 to 3 days, the air quality in the Fairbanks area has been in the red, orange and red. If you've been tracking it all, you've noticed that. So we are in that situation where folks need to pay attention. Based on the forecasts and the things that I've seen for the next week or so, as they said, we might get a pause, but then things are going to start going again. Looks like the transport will be similar to what we saw in the last week, so we're forecasting that things could end up basically in that same place again next week as far as air quality. Other than that, I'll be here afterwards and look for the daily forecasts.
Thanks, Trent. My name is David Gibbs. I'm the Emergency Operations Director with the Borough. I want to start off by thanking those of you that woke up in the middle of the night last night and had to move along. I really appreciate it. It seemed like it went fairly orderly from our perspective. Hopefully you felt the same way, but it's a big deal for us, and it's not a decision that we make lightly. But thanks to those that moved. It was our first level 3 evacuation since 2013, the Stewart Creek fire. Just a recap for those that aren't familiar with the various levels of evacuation that we employ. I'm already alluded to level 1, which is really the state that everybody that lives up here in a fire-prone environment should be at the beginning of fire season. That's kind of the ready stage. You should be ready to evacuate if you have to, make your houses fire-wise and fire-safe. The second stage is the set stage, which is that time where you have to be ready to move at a moment's notice. We've worked on the messaging to improve that to say be prepared to move at a moment's notice. That's a really key point. So that's assembling things like we've talked to you last week about the 6 Ps, your papers, pills, pets, photos, personal computers, and having a family emergency plan. So the 6 Ps of preparedness. How to get those notifications, we have a couple of ways. If you have a landline phone, you're already pulled out of our 911 location database, so we automatically can send an alert to you. I think you're all familiar, and we have over 2,000 people now that have opted into the alerts that we've been pushing out. So there's information about how to opt into those alerts through the various brochures, and also information up on our both Facebook page and the borough's web page. There's a couple of other ways. We would really encourage you, if you want to get a voice notification, to go through the smart911.com. That's kind of the Cadillac approach, and it allows you to share information with call takers when you dial 911, but it also allows you to opt into these notifications and get voice alerts. I want to acknowledge an issue. We understand we've been using subdivisions as location, and I know that it's caused confusion for people that aren't necessarily familiar with their subdivisions, and we're working on that issue to better refine the location information. We've heard that feedback. We acknowledge it. We're working on it. We have some constraints with the 150 character limitation of SMS messaging. So you've got those great lengths, sort of long lists of streets. We tried to fit those into 150 character limit. So we're working on it. And again, apologize to those that we caused some confusion for. We do have evac guides available online, both through our borough Facebook page and our borough web page. And the last thing I wanted to do is acknowledge, we have some volunteers, the Red Cross, for example. We have a very small staff. We couldn't do what we do without the participation of our volunteers. So we have volunteers from throughout the borough. The Red Cross is here. We also have community emergency response team volunteers that went out and literally knocked on every door in the areas that we have within those places that we wanted to prepare for evacuation. I also want to acknowledge that all of the area fire departments have contributed equipment to support you. So it's truly a borough-wide effort, and I really want to reach out and thank the volunteers. They've been absolutely wonderful for us to work with. So with that, I'm going to conclude my comments and turn it over to Mayor Ward.
Thanks, David. Bryce Ward, Fairbanks North Shore Borough Mayor, and David stole my thunder. So, but I did want to say thank you to everyone for being here today. Really, I think one of the important parts about this particular event is, we've had forest fires in our community before. They have threatened structures before, but this is when we're really talking about our community, our neighborhoods. So it's a little bit different than a cabin out in the woods. And so that's where we really want to make sure that everyone understands the ready, set, go. And what that means and what you can do to be prepared. And if we do, like we did last night, have to call an evacuation, we want to make sure that folks are prepared for that, and it's not something that you're trying to scramble to understand. So if you have neighbors and friends that aren't here tonight, if you can share that message with them, let them know what that means, the information that we're going to be expecting you to gather, so that if there is an event where we ask you to leave, so that the forestry guys, the firefighters can get in there and do their job, that we're not, as the residents, not getting in the way. So I do want to give a big thank you and shout out to all the firefighters and the staff that have been fighting this fire. They've done a phenomenal job. We've got some high class, highly technical, skilled folks that have been working here. Same with our volunteer crews. One of the things that I find always amazing about Fairbanks is whenever there's a disaster, whenever something happens, people jump to help. And we have definitely seen that happen here too. We ask that you keep it within those guidelines. And so we want to make sure that we're not getting in the way of the folks that are skilled and trained in this area. But if you could join me with a little round of applause, thank you for all the firefighters. So with that, I just want to conclude my comments. We have had the rain, as you guys have heard, I think 3 or 4 times now. It's a really good thing. We want more of it, but it's only going to give us a couple days of reprieve. So this is time for us to still continue to prepare, continue to get ready, prep your homes, so that if we do have a change for the worse, the winds change, that one, you can get out safely, and that two, that your homes are ready and prepared for the firefighters to come in and do what they can to help ensure that those are saved. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for your thoughts in all of this, and continue to be prepared. We do have resources available when it comes to information. That's one of the things that we're trying to step up to the plate and make sure we've got. There is a texting option where you can text to get alerts, whether or not any time of the day. I got one last night about midnight, 12:30. I think like many of you folks did. That's the best way that we can reach out and get a hold of you. And please, if you have friends and neighbors that are not on that system yet, share that number with them. So thank you.
I want to thank all the speakers. Appreciate the comments. And again, after we conclude kind of the group, the open forum, we'll have folks available for questions afterwards. A couple things. David hit on some information about where you can, where you can find information about the emergency evacuation guide from the borough online. Those resources are also available on some of our fire incident information pages. So I want to touch a little bit too on those. You can also, as I mentioned, find information about the Shovel Creek Fire on INCIWeb, INCIWEB. Just search for that and look for Shovel Creek Fire. We also have handouts. There's signboards in the communities. We're emailing things out. I think the news is carrying some of that. We have community meetings like this. AK Fire Info, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. There's a Facebook account. We're trying to reach out to you in as many ways as possible to give information out. We have a phone line. All that information is on some of the materials that you received tonight. So want to make sure you have a way to reach us, and we have a way to reach out with that information to you about the Shovel Creek Fire, and I wanted to make sure to remember that. Also, just kind of segueing to what the incident commander said in his remarks, as we look out to some of these communities further out to the east and looking at those things to be prepared and be thinking ahead, again, just want to let folks know, as we've heard in that level 1 or ready stage, I just don't want anybody to be surprised if you do get an alert in the coming near future that says you're now in a level 1 ready. Again, just want to give you some advance warning that you will likely be receiving some messages about that in some of these communities, kind of just kind of here on the map, sort of around the Moose Mountain Lodge and where just on the edge of the map here. So again, some of those notifications might go out, but again, as you heard many times tonight, everybody in the interior in the summer should be thinking about that. Bringing a map over. So while they're doing that, you can kind of see all the structures there. So I want to open up for questions. Again, I'm going to remind everybody of the rules. If you have a question that's good for the group, we'll go ahead and ask it. If you have one that's just kind of, you think you have a specific question for somebody, we'll go ahead and close the meeting out in a few minutes, and you can ask those individually. This lady asked a question first.
How many structures are there? I mean, you're just saying if you follow things like how many are already evacuated. So part 1 is how many structures are we looking at in that area? And the second thing is, should we have to evacuate as a group, what's going to be the traffic control since there's only one road?
Do you want me to go ahead and do you want to answer that?
I can't.
Okay, I'll go and take stab, and Norm, if you have anything. So, and correct me if I'm wrong. Right now, I think the number in terms of what we're. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I meant to just say I was going to repeat the question. Thank you for that. The question was, how many structures are in that group that we're looking at currently? And is that everything? Was that kind of the gist of the question? Did I miss a part? Okay, so the question was how many structures are we currently, and that number I think is about 500 or so in all of that. That I think that number is rough number, but it includes the ones that we've talked about in the releases, and then some of those new areas that we're looking out to. Correct number?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Great. Next question, sir.
I've got a question related to the 24 hotline and being able to contact people at night, especially about emergency evacuation. So last night, as like Perfect Purge and Martin got their updates that they were moved to a level 3, we live in a subdivision that we need to actually evacuate through them to get out. So we're in McLeod. And there was no number to dial that you could actually talk to anyone about what was actively going on. A status update about the fire. Is there a 24-hour working phone number to find out about evacuation procedures and like fire activity? I actually.
So, question was, is there a 24-hour number? And there was a desire to have a place to call when that notification came out and getting some information about the evacuation, also asking about the fire. Is that what I'm hearing? Basically a 24-hour call center?
It's really hard to get information. He's my husband, so I feel like I can tag on. It's really hard to get information about what the fire is doing, like up to date, 24 hours. It's 1 o'clock in the morning and you're finding out that like the neighborhood you have to drive through is at a level 3, but somehow we're still only at a level 1. And so like we want to be able to also want to be like, what happened with the fire? Should we be leaving? Because that's our evacuation route, and there's nobody to talk to about actual fire behavior.
Okay, so the fire information line that we have published out is 907-347-6801. And I think we talked last night. We talked late at night, I believe. Yep. So because we had that late night evacuation, we staffed that line. We normally staff that line from 7 a.m. to about 11 p.m. And because of what happened last night, I think we were up until about 4 in the morning answering calls. So in those special circumstances, we're doing that. And David, do you want to say something about the call center for the? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was essentially the same situation for us. We had staffed the call center until 11 o'clock and then had closed down operations, and it took us about an hour or so to ramp back up once we got the word. So the notifications went out before the call center got staffed up. But once it was staffed up, it was staffed up all night and into today. So
What is your number?
our number is 459-1308.
And is that going to be now like standard procedure that it's going to be staffed through the night with this fire activity? It's going to come back up after this rain?
So it depends on what the fire's doing. I think we're going to make some decisions, and we'll announce the hours that it will be open through the messaging system and through our social media outlets.
One thing I want to say in relation to that is I've called your number several times, and the people have been very friendly and professional. But the first thing they say is you can go to the web. And I tell them, I'm out in Goldstream, I don't have access to the web. Well, go on your smartphone. I don't have a smartphone. So I rely heavily on the radio, KUAC. So I strongly am asking you if you could put messages on KUAC. There's been some, but for the people that have neither of those devices, if you could use KUAC, I think it would be beneficial.
Okay, well, we'll take that back, and we'll speak with KUAC.
So again, the question was about basically connected, right? Like wireless, internet, some other ways. And again, the call center, there's signboards. I know some of those things, and then radio coverage. And I've heard some great things about updates on the radio. And I think one piece of feedback related to that was with new information saying, hey, this is a new piece of information, so people hear that it's a new piece of information. I saw a hand over here a while back. Sir.
For those of us who already had evacuated last night and need to go in and make further improvements, do we have a chance after the rain tomorrow?
So let's have that question with, we can talk about that question and maybe some specifics if you don't mind. The question was, for those that have been evacuated, is there anything that can be done to go and make some improvements? So if you're in that situation, again, we can kind of maybe talk about that at the end of the meeting and have those discussions. Ma'am.
Just a communication question. You said you had signboards. Where are they? Where did they go? Where do you go to find one every time you get information?
Well, great question. So there's a number of signboards. There's a couple different kinds of signboards. So there's some signboards in each of the communities that we've been talking about thus far. Again, CERT volunteers have been doing a great job putting stuff up. We have some around the community. There's one, there's one that is parked right next door here at Ivory Jacks. There's one down at the Goldstream station. There's a number of them around town. We've got them at mailbox locations. So they're around the community, and we can work on getting that out to you.
Specific address.
Yeah.
Where they are.
Yeah.
Intersection.
And feel free to come up and talk after. We can kind of figure out where you're at and where the closest one is. Thank you. In the back.
So based on what you said, you expect the fire to move east and south to the fire break line, realistically.
I'm going to divert that one to Jake or Norm. Can you repeat?
Did you say based on what we said, we expect the fire to move east and then south toward the fuel break line?
Yeah, sounds like a fire break line is where you're setting up. Realistically, you expect it's going to go through that.
Yeah, so based on the fuels out in the Chattanooga River Valley, which is predominantly black spruce. There's a few hardwood patches out there, but honestly there is a lot of spruce out there. If we don't receive a significant amount of rain, we expect it to dry out 1 to 3 days. If we continue to get westerly winds up that Chattanooga River Valley, that's a very real possibility. So that's what we're preparing for. We're planning for the worst, but hoping for the best, really.
Can you point out that line on the map?
Okay. So you have the Hard Luck Burn to the west. You have the main ridge line that runs up to Murphy Dome, and it continues to run east toward Martin Subdivision, continue eastward past Perfect Perch, and then over to McLeod Subdivision, Darling Avenue area. Along there's a fuel break that was put in by the state of Alaska. And then from McLeod Subdivision, we're going to use equipment to put a line in down to the Chattanooga River. We'll also be using hand crews in there and other equipment.
All right. Somebody's been out in the rain, so is ma'am in the back. The question is, what about the structures north of the Chattanooga River? Jake?
North of the fire what about the structures north of the fire along the Chattanooga River corridor? Okay, so we have personnel using airboats, setting up sprinklers on the north and south side of the river, pretty much from the boat launch at the Bennett Highway working east and continuing east all the way to the Elliott Highway. That's our plan. And we're just going to continue progressing eastward ahead of the fire progression if it so moves that way.
So that's a good reminder, and I'm glad you asked the question. The question is, what about using Bennett Highway? And so that was a good segue. I wanted to mention that there is going to be a lot of fire traffic, fire personnel, equipment, people moving around, basically firefighters and equipment people moving around along there. So we would discourage you from using that particularly. I think we've said in hours between 10 and 10. Is that still valid time frames? So again, it just ask people to avoid that area along the Bennett Highway. Go to the middle here. Sorry about that.
My question might be for Bill, but I want to know what conditions is going to threaten Goldstream Valley, where there's a whole ton.
Well, Bill, since she called you, I'm going to let you answer that one. She wanted to hear you talk.
So we actually do have some models and tools that we use to help figure out, like in the next 14 days, what are the likelihoods of reaching different areas. But it really has to depend on what particular weather events happen between now and then. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I can tell you the weather events that actually cause the movement of the fire. We're using some general rules of thumb about temperature above 75 degrees, humidity below 25%, and wind in the 10 to 15 mile an hour range. You get those? Yeah, well, that would be the wind you would have to carry the fire south. Yes, that's that general rule of thumb. But the combination of those three things together is what causes the most rapid fire spread.
And what, given where the fire is now and the worst conditions, how long would it take
The question is, how long would it take, given the conditions now, to get to Goldstream Valley? And I would actually have to sit down and do that analysis for this point on this fire to this point on the ground to get there. I'd be glad to talk to you more about that in the future or right afterwards if you want. But I don't want to talk about worst case scenarios. I mean, because every time I've done that, they end up not working. So, okay.
I guess just to hit on your question, I can't run the numbers either, but yesterday with the 21-hour wind and the conditions we had, it went 3 miles from yesterday at about 1600 till things died down, I think sometime about 1 o'clock in the morning. So if that helps kind of calibrate, that's what we were seeing yesterday. And then there was a question, I believe it was online, Mayor Ward brought up. They're asking about how, as if that fire progresses to the east, how we determine if we had to have evacuations. So we talked a little bit about this earlier in the week. We had our first public meeting. We have what we call management action points. So if a fire or a condition reaches that point, that is something for us to have a consideration about what that action will be. And on this fire, we've got management action points throughout the fire, and that's what helped us or gave us the tools we needed to make the decision last night to do the evacuations of the 2 subdivisions that we did. So to answer your question you brought up, those were the most immediately threatened, and it reached that management action point. Something we can do and probably will do if we do something like that again is make sure the residents upstream. And this is something these evacuations are tough. I mean, I've done this for a long time. They're never easy, and you never get it perfect. But that's something we can do to if we do an evacuation downstream, the upstream folks notify of why and what's going on. And I will say I've done dozens of evacuations both in Alaska and the lower 48, and this really was one of the better coordinated events, and it goes just with the working with the borough, having that time to get this planned out. So nothing's perfect, I'll give you that, but it really is. We're doing the best we can to get that information to the right people. So we use those decision points. We call them management action points. If it reaches that, if it's a geographic spot or a condition in the fire, that's a point for us to look at a pre-planned evacuation that we have preset, whether that's going to a level 3 like we talked about, the level 2, which is that ready, or that set, or like last night, it reached Murphy's Ridge. It was coming down the backside of that. The conditions, it was blowing 20 miles an hour. Our firefighters out in the line did not feel comfortable having people in their homes right there. So that was how we made that decision. And we have those points set up throughout the incident. Am I allowed to point to somebody? Go ahead.
I just want to say I work in public information distribution, and although it hasn't been perfect, I can see clearly that you have assembled a very strong communications team, and you yourselves, as well as the firefighters on the front line, are doing an exceptional job to get information to us and to make sure that you're prepared to answer our questions. So I want to thank all of you here as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We come into an incident, we set objectives. A lot of them are from the agency we're working for, and one of the top ones after firefighter and public safety is the communication, getting the message out to the public, and listening and being honest, giving good information, getting feedback from you, and reacting to it. So that's what we try to do while we're here. I'm in trouble now. Go ahead.
Well, I'm somebody who's having trouble finding information like that map there. I don't think was up an hour before we came here, and I find that they're not time stamped, so we don't know when that picture was taken. I would like to see something where kind of like log entries where you could get every 4 hours an update on every 4 often.
Yeah. Right.
So.
The maps don't load. When they load, there's no captions to tell you what the little red dot means.
Okay. So to summarize the questions, counter to good information, there was some challenge getting some information. And so the maps, I'm going to speak a little bit about the process. So every morning, based on what happened the day before, the most current situation, they provide a map. and that has what happened yesterday. And so this comes out in the morning with the update. Those are found on IncyWebs. There's a place, and we can talk specifically if you have questions, but I want to let folks know this will show as of the date. This is the size. The map title actually has that date. So like this one would say map Shovel Creek Fire map June 30th.
But not the time. It could be 23 hours old when you're looking at it.
I think what we're saying is we want it more often, right? Once a day in the morning, that's not really good enough, especially with how fast this is growing. Like, we need this more often.
So that's a challenge for us as well. I mean, we honestly last night hope our safety guy is not here. We had a firefighter climb one of the towers with an IR camera, and he's trying to find out where that is. In a perfect world, we can fly with a helicopter, we get a map, we get it back to our GIS staff, and we have that information ourselves. But yesterday it was smoky. We've had terrible conditions for that. We rely a lot on the satellite imagery. It's this VIIRS and MODIS. Those are heat signatures. They're not 100% accurate, but it's what we've been using in a lot of places where we can't get helicopters around it. So that's been a challenge for us too, and a frustration for us. As we get those products, we get those out as quick as we can, and that's something with this little bit of weather change, hopefully we can get in front of that. But that's just one of the challenges we're facing as well.
Just kind of continuing on to the gentleman's question before the segue, mentioned about blogs too. Mentioned AK Fire Info. That is set up in a blog fashion. You can also find information on Alaska DOF Division of Forestry Facebook page. So there's a number of ways that it's coming out. There's some static stuff that happens on a daily basis. There's stuff that comes out throughout the day. There's different ways and different tempos and different products. So again, yeah. Okay. We'll talk to you afterwards. And so we're going to take one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up for. All right, Bernie is telling me that the gentleman in the back. We're going to take one more question, then we'll be available for questions afterwards for individuals. So, sir. So for the audience, I want to just repeat that. The gentleman was saying when it's smoky, he was echoing the comment, when it's smoky, you can't fly, and that does make it difficult to see what exactly the fire is doing.
And then the question is AICC 6 report everyone that shows that we got 555 people in there, but how many type 1 and how many type 2 damage?
The question was, the daily update shows that as of this morning, there was 550 personnel assigned to the Shovel Creek fire. How many Type 1 and Type 2 personnel?
9 hot shot crews, 2 IA crews, and 2 Alaska EFF crews.
Okay, that bottom's on the information SIP report. If you go all the way to the bottom, all the crews are listed and what fires are on for the whole state. You got to go to the very end though to look at it.
And Chris was saying that is also available online. Information is also available online. So, ladies and gentlemen, kids, adults, all of you, I want to thank you for coming. Appreciate you being out here in the rain. This concludes our community meeting for the Shovel Creek Fire. There will be people available afterwards to answer questions. Thank you.